Hey Garth, it's good to see you today.
Yeah, good to see you too, Jason. Always a pleasure.
Okay, Garth, we're wrapping up leading by example today. This is a third of our three podcasts on the topic. Big congratulations to you and the Leafs out there. You're going to make it to the second round finally. The Oilers too are going on to the second round, just so you know. So we're looking forward to taking down
Representing
the
Alberta.
Golden Knights. But hey, listen, when we think about leading by example, I want you to
Hmm.
dig deep and I want you to think about your Toronto Maple Leafs. And I want you to
Yeah.
think about who is the player, current or past, who did the best job of leading by example and why.
Gary Roberts.
That was easy for you. Tell me more.
Yep, Gary Roberts. Never missed a game. He was in on every check. He was a great goal scorer. He was just the hardest working man in the NHL for years. Gary Roberts. You can't, listen, talent is great. Talent is great. Gary had a little bit of it, but what we had a lot of was hard work and work ethic. Gary Roberts.
You know what? This is pure gold, Garth. We didn't plan it, but we talk about in this podcast the value of hard work and most importantly, consistency over charisma. And I think your boy Gary Roberts might have a lot of those in place. And the neat thing is we can see it from afar. I don't think you probably ever were in the locker room with Gary Roberts or on the ice,
Yeah,
but you just know it when you see it. Hey, Garth. And I'm
yeah,
excited about people exploring leading by example through this podcast.
yeah. He's a gem, and so was Dr. Katrina Sampson. So we talk a little bit about what gems she shares with us. So enjoy, listeners. This will be a good one for you.
Go Oilers, go.
With Garth and Jason, we dive right in, breaking down Ted's world. Let's begin from AFC, Richmond's field to your day to day. Lassoing leadership's here to stay. Keep leading the lasso way. Together we'll grow stronger every day. So plug in your headphones and let's start the show. With lessons from Ted, we'll learn and grow.
Hey there, Lasso and leadership friends. Welcome back to Lassoing Leadership. This is our final episode in our Leading by Example sort of mini series here. I'm your host, Garth Nichols, joined as always by the endlessly insightful, Roy Kent-esque, if you will, Jason Rogers.
Garth, I'm surprised we got this far into this, and that's the first time you've called me Roy Kent. I'm not sure if I should say thank you or hold that against you. All right, Jamie, here we go. That's a bit
There
of a
you go.
high bar. I'm gruff but full of heart, much like Roy. I'll take it. And it's been a real pleasure to explore this topic with you, and especially to hear from our incredible guest last week, Dr. Katrina Sampson, on how she lives out leadership by leading by example each and every day. And I can't think of anybody be better for the topic. She is so authentic and vulnerable and real and insightful and wise. I could go on, Garth. That was an incredible interview. Thanks for setting that up.
Yeah, it was great. And Katrina is a huge Ottawa Senators fan. So I was walking around the school today in Maple Leaf, blue and white, which is pretty good. Leading by
Ouch.
example. Well
Yeah.
done. But listen, we're going to talk a little bit about what we learned about leading by example. So let's ground our wrap up in what we heard from Katrina. And I'll go first because I loved how she walked us through her journey to educational leadership. Knowing where you come from is critical to ground yourself when you move into positions of leadership. I really liked when she talked about the visibility of leadership, that people are always watching what we do more than what we say, and that being visible, like literally visible, is critical to success. Just so, to be around so people can actually see you as an example and see you leading as an example. It's just a good reminder. Every hallway interaction, every email, every moment where we are present or absent, it all signals something to our community. And I really appreciated that from her.
Yeah. And I think the idea of presence, Garth, I think is really important. We talk about presence, it's being in the present moment, giving your time, energy, and space to whoever you're with. And I think that's truly leading by example. And I really appreciate how Katrina connected that to belonging. She reminded us that modeling inclusive leadership isn't about big speeches. It's about small, consistent actions. She spoke about the importance of listening and being around to get awareness. Being aware is a big point you continue to drive home. And I think, sometimes in the busy lives we have in education, whether we're teaching or leading, we get lost in that. We're not able to be aware and be present. So Katrina reminded us that listening deeply and actually following through were really important. And that's where credibility is built, credibility and trust. And sometimes I think leadership is that simple, Garth.
Yeah. Yeah. And she even built further upon that as part of her dissertation, I guess. And the part about succession planning really hit me. Thinking about how we lead not just for today, but to empower those who come next. She spoke about the work she's doing with women in leadership around independent schools across Canada. I see her doing this work within Havergal College as well. I think it's just so important. And I love how she's brought that to the forefront of her leadership. It really did reframe, leading by example, not just as a personal trait, but actually a long-term strategy and sustainability.
Now, she didn't call it out directly, Garth, but she talked a lot about her principles and values throughout the conversation. So I think if you listen carefully for that, and I'll go back to the podcast time and again, I have a couple times over the last couple of weeks. And I think, one of Katrina's values is being clear. And I think being clear is to be kind, as we've talked about previously, and Brene Brown and the power there. And one of the things that's stuck with me is Katrina just said pretty bluntly, if a decision's to be made and we're still uncertain, then invite people into the conversation. But if a decision's to be made and the decision's already made, save everybody the time, energy, and effort and be respectful of them and just let them know the decision's made and we're moving on. And I just loved how clear and kind that was. And I think sometimes we struggle with that as leaders in this world of, collaborative decision-making as the optimal, which it is, right? Most of the times it is, but sometimes decisions needs to be made and you got to be clear to be kind. So Katrina really drove that home as well.
Yeah. Clearly this guest has resonated with you and I, Jason, but we've also had some great feedback as well. So thanks to all those who have written in or sent us a voice message, just asking about the pod or asking us questions. And a big shout out to Darren on the West Coast for your feedback and general enthusiasm for the pod. We really appreciate it. And so one of the things we received feedback on, Jason, was our own lived experience and really providing examples and how we navigate those examples. So I've got to turn the mic on you here, which I've done in the past and I know you thoroughly enjoy. This is the moment of truth, my friend. Can you share a moment of your own leadership journey where you knew you were leading by example, or maybe a time when you knew you weren't and you had to recalibrate?
Yeah, I think the easiest time to realize that you're leading by example are in times of celebration or tragedy. Like, I hate to say it, but it's like you see yourself, you can see yourself from a third party point of view in those very happy or very sad moments. And you realize that you're at the front of the parade. And I think that's the easiest time to know when you're leading by example, when you need to show strength or when you need to show that you're struggling with somebody, that vulnerability, or you need to show celebration and jubilation for whatever is taking place. And I think of those moments at assemblies or graduations or, other times where I think leading by example is really easy. I also, the simple bit of, I always say to people, around here that not even a surgeon runs to the operating room. So slow yourself down, pace yourself, and others will follow. Because in this hectic, race that we're in, and I find myself leading by example when I'm able to slowly walk through the hallways, stop and talk to whoever I meet, greet students, have those conversations. I think those are the moments where I most readily, day in and day out, find myself leading by example. What about you, Garth? When do you see yourself leading by example? What's an example?
Yeah, there's one that comes to mind, and it happened many, many years ago. And it was a really interesting moment when it was a celebration, but it was a formal, it was a prom. And we unfortunately had some students arrive in a bit of a state and not following the code of conduct as it pertained to alcohol consumption.
Right.
And as we do in Toronto, I don't know how it is in Calgary, but as we do in Toronto, we had police officers there, and there were clearly bags that may have some things we should have confiscated. but it got all mixed up. And I just remember there was a moment where I said, hey, can we slow down for 1 second? We need to slow down. There was no rush to get these kids into the venue. There's no rush to like ask the cops to do these things. We need to slow down. We need to put kids at the center. And I thought in that moment that I was being really self-aware and like bringing to bear how I lead. And it's really interesting. Would I change anything? I don't think I would. But it's interesting because one of my colleagues brought this up to me afterwards, and in a really, I think, compassionate and caring way, said, when you did that, I felt you undermined my leadership. So I raised that only to say, like, especially as you mentioned earlier in this collaborative space of leadership that we have, when you are working with others, make sure that when you are leading by example, you lead with the right, point, like the right play, if you will. You're calling the right play. And so for me, instead of jumping to, hey, let's slow down our thinking, perhaps I could have slowed down my thinking first before I just sort of gave that recommendation out loud.
I think you're leading by example, Garth, probably came in the aftermath of that, though. I think slowing down and being humble enough to say, I hear your feedback and I want to make better on it next time. I think that is leading by example. I think that's what it's all about. I think you've done a nice job of portraying how you might not feel like you're leading by example, but then demonstrating how you did.
Yeah, thanks. And you just reminded me, one of the things that came out of that was we need to have one person who is leading, not 3 people who are supervising. That was learning. That was a good change. But I also appreciate what you said. And if you bring both of these moments together, I think we all have in our calendar, where our calendar says we've got to be someone at some point in time or for some sort of audience, but our leadership presence or lack thereof might say another thing. And so like Katrina mentioned, it's the reflection afterwards that can reset us, bring us back into alignment, and give us a little bit of learning on our sort of journey of leadership.
Garth, I think that's a great lead into our leadership challenge at the end. But before we get off of Darren's comments, he actually left another comment in there, which I want to bring up with you. I don't know if you remember this or not, but he said, hey, listen, I'm in a leadership role in a school and I'm busy. I don't know how y'all make time for this podcast week over week. Seems like you're getting them out every week and I love them. But how do you balance work, life, all of these things? So when we think about leading by example, Garth, this is part of thought leadership for me. I know why I do it and I have a sense of how I do it, but I'm wondering about you. How do you balance all of these competing priorities in an effort to lead by example?
Well, listeners, let's pull back the curtain for you a little bit here. At the end of every podcast, Jason and I frantically look at our calendars and try and figure out, 2, 3, sometimes a month in advance when we can record these podcasts. So we're just, we're getting used to that. But for me, it's what helps me be present, what helps me do this work is priorities and who am I accountable to. I can't imagine. We've done it. I think we've only done it once, Jason, where we, in the 3 years we've been doing this, have missed a week. And I think we just replayed a podcast. So I feel accountable to our listeners. I also feel very accountable to you because we are busy people, but you are head of school and have so many things on the go. I'm accountable to you, so I don't want to miss that. But also, I've said this time and again, this is our time to reflect on leadership. And in a fast-paced world of education and educational leadership, these are beautiful moments where we get to slow our thinking down. There you go, slow our thinking down and reflect on our own leadership. And this is just a great venue to do it, and to do it in partnership with you, Jason, is something that I just prioritize so highly.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think we have to make time for the things that matter, right? I think that's what it comes down to. And I know the kind of energy conversations give me in creating. And so, in my calendar, I've got like I've said before on this podcast, I have a Be Curious block where I sit down and get curious about the world, but I also have, a podcast block with you, Garth. So I have an opportunity to do this. And I think it legitimately plays into my sense of well-being in my work, that I prioritize myself time and again. And this podcast is, all about me. So, so that's how we do it, I guess, Darren. That's a really great question.
Thanks, Darren.
Great. And, Garth, we had one additional question come in over MP3, and it's a voice question. So maybe we should play on it right now.
Let's do it.
Version of this previously, but it's something I've often wondered about the show is, what happens if or when the Lasso way and Ted just doesn't work with somebody? The show explores, hey, the person doesn't come back around. They don't change their mind about Ted, regardless of other people's opinions. And I'm just thinking about like myself and my own leadership journey and other people I supervise or mentor or just learn alongside. What happens when you just don't get along with somebody that's, in your orbit, or a colleague that they just don't jive with your leadership style, right? So that's something I wish the show explored, because I think that's real life stuff, right? But it's also, even if the show didn't explore it, just curious where you and Garth land on, hey, I'm showing up, I'm being authentic, I'm being real, I'm being kind and empathetic, but this other person, it's just a personality, doesn't mix. So anyways, thanks for the quick chat. And
This question that keeps coming up, I think,
Yeah.
honestly, is like, when the Lasso way doesn't work for somebody, what do we do? What do we do if people aren't just willing to follow this kinder, more compassionate way of leading that we've been talking about, Garth? So I'm going to put you on the spot. You went first in season 1 all the time, so you're going first this time again, buddy. So over to you. How would you answer Adam's question?
Yeah, I love the question. Always bring us back to Ted Lasso. I do want to acknowledge that I do think this is explored in the show. So it's explored with Rebecca and Ted when they first meet. No one can stand the guy, right? But she gets won over because she saw what he was trying to do, and he was persistent and consistent. It's explored with Rebecca and Higgins. At the very beginning. Higgins was a part of the Rupert Mannion show, and Rebecca said, you've got 2 choices. One is I can fire you, or 2 is that you can do exactly what I say. And so that was a tension that Higgins had to live with and deal with that doesn't get resolved until season 3.
Right.
Really. Yeah.
Yep.
Ted and Dr. Sharon Fieldstone. There's just, I do think there's a lot of examples where this is explored, but none so prescient and purposeful as Ted and Nathan Shelley.
Yeah.
He starts as a trainer. He gets brought up in the Lasso way and very quickly does not like Ted and very quickly wants to establish his own self. And so he starts to distance himself from Ted. And then I've said this in season 1, Ted does not handle Nathan Shelley very well at all. And so he goes to literally the dark side, Rupert Mannion, and Rupert's, chuffing him up and all those things. But then Nathan realizes that's not what he wants either. And then ultimately, so we seem to think, we'll see in season 4, but comes back to the Ted Lasso way, I think reluctantly. But anyway, all of these examples to say, it doesn't, I think a leader can't calibrate themselves to lead differently for different people. And like we say to sometimes our schools and our families, if you don't like the school, there's another school out there for you. And you are kind of stuck with that leader. So I'm advocating that as a leader, be aware, as Katrina says, be aware, be honest, and maybe actually, if you can pick up on it, have those conversations. But if you are someone who's being led by a leader that you don't like, that's up to you and how you deal with it. I don't think you can expect them to change for you and vice versa. And so you have to find ways through it. And I think, honestly, these last 10 major themes that we've talked about that we're ending on today is, how are you going to lead by example? Whether you are a middle manager, whether you're a senior admin, if you don't like working with someone because of their leadership style, what are you going to do about it? That's kind, compassionate, that fills you with from your values and is acting out of integrity.
Garth, right now, you're painting a picture for me that reminds me of Jim Collins' Good to Great. And it's back to the original leadership kind of manifesto. If you haven't read it, get in there and read it. And he talks about being on the bus or not being on the bus and getting the right people in the seats on the bus. And in this metaphor, obviously the leader is driving the bus. There's a vision, they're heading towards somebody. And then there's any number of seats behind that are on the bus. So I think it comes down to defining the vision, getting the right people on the bus, and then getting them into the right seats. And if somebody's not comfortable with being on that bus heading that direction or being in the seat that they've been assigned, at some point, we just have to come to terms with the fact that it's not working out. And then the only nuance there, Garth, is like sometimes if we're in middle management, we don't have the authority power to make a change that we might see as necessary. And I think that's when we start to work with performance management or our own supervisor to work towards a better, brighter space.
Yeah. But I do think that there is room there for, as the question asks, there's room for you to actually do some introspection here. What is it about their leadership I don't like? Are they too kind? Are they too compassionate? Do you need someone else? So I think it's a great question. There's no playbook answer here, but I think it does involve some introspection for sure.
Exactly. And I think it's become clear in this series that leading by example isn't about perfection. There's no perfect black and white playbook for this. We are living in color, not in black and white. And It is truly about intention. It's about knowing your values and showing up in the way that embodies those values and those principles, especially when it's hard.
Yeah, and that's a challenge in our world, education, leadership, life in general. It's easy to default to telling rather than showing. And Jason, I want to talk about a word that kept coming up with Katrina, and the word was veneer.
Yeah.
And Katrina is big on showing the journey and process and wants to get beyond the veneer to stories of hard work. As she said, there is no substitute for hard work. She prompted us to think of just having, when we're leading, if all we are is hopeful, happy, and successful, then we are creating a perception that's just not real. So she prompted us to think not just having a veneer of hope and optimism and success, but to be aware that the danger this might pose is it creates a gap between the perception and the reality, not only of who we are, but how our organization is doing to others. And I think that word veneer is so important for us to, as leaders, for us to think about what is the veneer that we have. We all kind of do, right? I walk down the hallways all the time. How you doing? Awesome. Amazing. These are my default answers, but no, I didn't get a lot of sleep last night. And no, we got Florida coming up against the Maple Leafs. I'm a little anxious,
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that word veneer is so significant for us.
Right. And I couldn't agree more. I think a really powerful refocusing that Katrina allowed us to do. And so, what I think about is if you're turning to hope and optimism too much, it can lead to the perception by others that it's just false. I think, toxic positivity is a thing. And I think that's at the core of it. It reminds us of a great guest we had, Julie Cass, author of Me First. And she said, you have to be authentic. And I really encourage people to go back to that recording. That was absolutely outstanding. And what Katrina reminds us, and what we've seen across so many of these episodes, is that the most impactful leaders build trust through consistency, not charisma. Consistency, not charisma.
Yeah, I actually ran into Julie last weekend, and it was amazing to see her. It was just awesome. She is nothing but a ball of positivity. She was so fun. At one point in time, she literally grabbed my arm and physically dragged me onto the dance floor. Thank you, Julie. We'll do that again. All right. So here's your Lassoing Leadership Challenge for the week. Listeners, ask yourself, where in your leadership are your actions and values aligned, and where might there be a gap? Where are your actions and values aligned, i.e., are you living what you say you are doing? Are you being authentic? And where might there be a gap? Is there a veneer that is causing you to ignore some realities or maybe a blind spot? Jason?
And if that challenge isn't challenging enough for you and you're brave enough, ask somebody you trust. Where do you see me walking the talk, and where do I have blind spots? That feedback might just be your next leadership unlock.
There you go. So that wraps up our Leading by Example series. A huge, generous thank you to Dr. Katrina Sampson for lending us her time and her wisdom. Thank you to our listeners for your feedback and your questions, and of course for tuning in and leading right alongside us.
As always, if this resonated with you, rate and share this podcast. It means a lot to us and it helps other people find this content. We appreciate everybody who shares it. Keep the conversation going. And as always,
keep leading the Lasso way. Thanks, everybody.
Well done,
Thanks,
Garth.
Jason.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Great to see you as always.
Step up to the mic. It's time to play.
Jason, you got off a little easy there on the intro, and I didn't get to I was too excited about Gary Roberts. Who's your Oiler leader by example, past or present?
Like I'm a Flames fan because I live in Calgary, but I'm a longtime Oilers fan, so I watched them in the 80s. And the guy I love more than anybody else is Paul Coffey for all the reason you talked about, Robert. But let me tell you a little story. Paul Coffey showed up last year at the Heritage Classic to sign autographs. Yeah. And I watched him sign one autograph after the other. And the thing I noticed about him was the person he was signing the autograph for was the only person in the world. He stood, he chatted, he wanted to know more about them. He talked to both my boys about things they couldn't even understand about hockey, but he really wanted to know who they were as humans. And so from my standpoint, I saw him as a silent, lead by example kind of D-man in the 80s. And just to see him in real life really put to shame that notion that you should never meet your heroes, because I love meeting Paul Coffey. He is unbelievable, and I hope he gets another cup this year.
And Paul, I hope you're listening. Same with you, Gary.
You got it.
All right. Go Leafs, go.
Step up to the mic. It's time to play. Lassoing leadership every day. From the pitch to the boardroom, lessons call to mind. Keep leading the lasso way. You'll find we've got heart, we've got soul, and humor too. Exploring how Ted shows what leaders should do. With Garth and Jason, we dive right in, breaking down Ted's world. Let's begin from AFC, Richmond's field to your day-to-day. Lassoing leadership's here to stay. Keep leading the lasso way. Together we'll grow stronger every day. So plug in your headphones and let's start the show. With lessons from Ted, we'll learn.